I don't know when exactly it happened, when I stopped being myself. It wasn't sudden. It was like being in a slow-moving current, drifting farther and farther away from the shore until, one day, I looked around and realized I was lost. I used to be confident, independent, a man with his own opinions and dreams. But over the years, little by little, my wife, Lillian, had reshaped me into something else. A man who second-guessed himself before speaking. A man who hesitated before making decisions. A man who had learned that arguing was pointless, that the easiest way to avoid conflict was to agree, to comply, to be obedient. Life would be easier if you were obedient, she had said one evening as she sipped her wine, her tone light but her words sharp. I had laughed it off at the time, pretending she was joking, but deep down, I knew she wasn't. Lillian wasn't cruel, not in any obvious way. She didn't yell or insult me. Her control was far more subtle, like an artist carefully sculpting her masterpiece. She would sigh when I made plans without consulting her first. She would give me a certain look when I expressed an opinion she didn't approve of. She would make me feel foolish, childish when I disagreed with her. And so, slowly but surely, I stopped disagreeing. At first, it seemed harmless. Letting her choose where we went for dinner, changing my wardrobe to match her taste, dropping certain friends because she didn't like them. But before I knew it, I had become someone I didn't recognize. The moment of realization came on a Sunday morning. I was standing in front of the mirror, shaving, when I caught my own eyes in the reflection. And for the first time in years, I really looked at myself. I saw the exhaustion in my face, the dullness in my eyes. I saw a man who had lost something vital, and I couldn't even remember when it had happened. I stepped out of the bathroom, my mind racing. I wanted to talk to Lillian, to ask her, who am I now? When did I stop being me? But when I entered the kitchen, I saw her at the counter, laughing at something on her phone. The moment I saw the screen, my stomach dropped. It was a message thread, a conversation between her and another man. And just like that, the fog in my mind lifted. I had been obedient. I had made life easier for her. But now I saw the truth. I had made my life easier for the wrong person. And it was time to take it back. For the longest time, I convinced myself that things weren't that bad, that maybe I was just overthinking, maybe I was being dramatic. After all, Lillian and I had been together for years. We had routines, inside jokes, shared memories. It wasn't like she was a bad wife. But that morning, staring at the message thread on her phone, I felt something crack inside me. The words on the screen blurred as my mind tried to process what I was seeing. My heart pounded against my ribs, a deep, sickening rhythm. The messages weren't explicit, not at first glance, but they didn't need to be. It was the tone, the familiarity, the way she laughed, really laughed. At his messages, a way she hadn't laughed at anything I said in a long time. The way she responded instantly, excitedly, while she had grown so slow to reply to me. And the nickname, Miss Me Already, Lil? Winking face, Lil. No one called her that. Not me, not her friends. It was something just for him. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers curled into fists. But I didn't say anything. I just turned away, walked back to the bathroom, and closed the door behind me. I needed a moment to think, to breathe. I gripped the edges of the sink and looked at myself again. Same face, same dull eyes, but now something was burning behind them. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, humming to herself, completely unaware that her little secret had been exposed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like being obedient. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, pretending nothing was wrong. I needed to be smart. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything, make me feel crazy, flip it back on me. No, I needed more than just a gut feeling and a single message. So I started watching. It wasn't difficult. I realized how blind I had been, how many signs I had ignored simply because I never thought to question them. The late nights at work that didn't add up. The sudden interest in her appearance, in her phone. The way she was always just stepping out to take a call. I tested her that night. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, smiling to herself. I sat beside her, closer than usual, and wrapped an arm around her waist. She tensed, just for a second, but I felt it. She laughed it off, leaning into me, but her phone flipped face down on the cushion. A habit I hadn't noticed before but now seemed glaringly obvious. And suddenly, I saw her differently. Not as my wife, not as the woman I had built a life with, but as a stranger, one who had been leading a double life right under my nose. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind raced through memories, moments, conversations. The little things she had said over the years, things I hadn't questioned at the time, suddenly made sense in a way I wish they didn't. She had been shaping me into something small, something manageable, because a man who questioned nothing was easier to lie to. A man who didn't argue wouldn't challenge the truth. I wasn't angry yet, not fully. I was just done. I turned onto my side, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, oblivious. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger. She thought I was still the same obedient husband she had carefully molded. She had no idea, but she would soon, because this was the last night she would ever think she had control over me. The morning after my realization, everything felt different. It was like waking up in someone else's life, one I had unknowingly sleepwalked into. Lillian kissed my cheek as she got out of bed, humming as she padded toward the bathroom. I watched her go, feeling nothing but a hollow sense of detachment. She had no idea that I knew. I sat up, stretching, as if everything was normal. The key now wasn't to react, not yet. I needed more than gut feelings and a single text. If I accused her now, she'd twist it, gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. And I couldn't afford to be talked out of the truth. So I decided to become something I never thought I would be, a silent observer in my own marriage. It started with small things. I watched her as she got ready for work, noticing how she took extra time on her makeup, choosing a perfume she hadn't worn in years. She used to wear it when we first started dating, back when she wanted to impress me. No, it wasn't for me. That much was clear. Then there was the way she clutched her phone a little too tightly when she thought I wasn't looking. How her fingers hovered over the screen when a notification popped up before she quickly swiped it away. She was careful, but not careful enough. That day, I left for work at the usual time, but instead of driving straight to the office, I pulled into a parking lot nearby and waited. I had a hunch and I needed to see if I was right. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, Lillian's car eased out of our driveway. She had told me she was working from home. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. I followed her, keeping a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. She wasn't going to the office, not to the grocery store either. I watched as she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe, and moments later, a man got out of a car parked across from her. A man I had never seen before. I stayed far enough back, watching as they greeted each other with an ease that made my stomach turn. She touched his arm, laughing at something he said, leaning in just a little too close. They sat by the window, talking, her hand brushing against his. I felt like a fool. How many times had she done this while I was busy making excuses for her? How many times had I been blind simply because I wanted to believe she loved me? I sat there for an hour watching them talk, laugh, exchange touches that were far too familiar. And as I watched, I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt something else, something I hadn't expected. I felt relief, because this was it, the confirmation I needed. There was no way to deny it now, no way for her to twist things in her favor. She had spent years making me feel small, making me doubt myself, making me obedient. And now I had proof that I had been obedient for the wrong person. By the time I got home, she was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't just spent the afternoon with another man. "Hey babe," she said, flashing me a smile. "How was work?" I stared at her, feeling like I was seeing her for the first time. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around. She wasn't real. She was an illusion, a carefully crafted mask. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Same as always." And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. No, I was going to play along. And when the time was right, I would walk away, not broken, not defeated, but free. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Lillian, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing, staring up at the ceiling as my mind raced. The old me, the man she had spent years reshaping, dulling down, making more manageable, would have confronted her immediately. He would have raised his voice, demanded answers, maybe even begged for an explanation. But that version of me was already fading. She had spent so much time controlling me, molding me into someone passive, someone easy. But she had made one fatal mistake. She assumed I would stay that way forever. I had no interest in screaming, no desire to argue. I didn't want revenge, and I wasn't going to make a scene. That would have given her power. No, I wanted something better. I wanted my freedom, and I was going to take it back on my terms. The first step was simple. I stopped caring. The next morning, Lillian went through our usual routine as if nothing had changed. She kissed my cheek, made her coffee, scrolled through her phone with that same distracted smile. I wondered if she was messaging him, the man she had met yesterday, the man who made her laugh in a way I hadn't seen in years. And for the first time, the thought didn't hurt me. It just confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't part of her world anymore. That was fine because I was about to build my own. I started small. I stopped texting her during the day, stopped checking in, stopped asking about dinner plans. At first, she didn't notice, but after a few days, she began to comment on it. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening as we sat at the table. I shrugged. "Just busy." It was a test, and she knew it. She watched me closely, waiting for me to elaborate, to ask if something was wrong. But I didn't. I could see the shift in her expression. Confusion. Lillian was used to control. She was used to having me wrapped around her finger, waiting for her approval, eager to please. And now that grip was slipping. The next step was reclaiming myself. For years, I had let her shape my world. The clothes I wore, the places we went, the people I saw, it had all been dictated by her preferences. I hadn't even realized how much of myself I had given up until I started taking it back. I went back to the gym, not for her, not to impress anyone, but for me. I stopped wearing the button-downs she had picked out for me and pulled out the old leather jacket she once told me looked too rugged. I started listening to the music I used to love, the songs she had always dismissed as immature. I met up with old friends, the ones she never liked, the ones she had slowly pushed out of my life over the years. And with every small act of defiance, I felt something return. The man she had made me forget. But the most satisfying part was watching her notice. She tried to act like she didn't care, but I saw the flicker of frustration when she asked me where I was going and I answered with a casual, "Out." I saw the way her brows knitted together when I came home later than usual, smelling like cologne she hadn't picked out for me. She was losing control, and for the first time in years I felt alive. But I wasn't done yet, because while I was rebuilding myself, Lillian was completely unaware that I was also preparing for something much bigger. A clean break, a future without her. She just didn't know it yet. Lillian had spent years believing she had me figured out. She thought she knew exactly how I would react to any situation. Calm, quiet, obedient. She had trained me well. But what she never accounted for was what would happen when the strings she had so carefully tied around me finally snapped. The shift was gradual. It had to be. If I changed too suddenly, she'd sense it, and if she felt cornered, she would turn things around, manipulate me into staying. I had seen her do it before, to friends, to colleagues. Lillian was a master at rewriting reality, making people doubt their own perceptions. But I was done being manipulated. I didn't confront her about the affair. I didn't need to. I had spent weeks gathering everything I needed: bank statements, hidden texts, social media logs. She thought she was being clever, deleting messages, using secret chats. But I wasn't the same man who once ignored the signs. I had learned, adapted, and now I had proof. I wasn't planning some dramatic, movie-style revelation, no shouting match, no flying accusations. That would give her the chance to fight back, to twist the truth. No, I had something far more effective in mind. I wanted her to realize she had lost before she even knew the game had changed. One morning, I left early, claiming I had a work trip. In reality, I was moving the first pieces into place. I had met with a lawyer weeks ago, quietly setting up everything I needed to walk away cleanly. I had rented a new apartment, set up a separate bank account, and redirected my paychecks. She thought I was just having an off couple of weeks. She thought my distance was temporary. That night, I returned home later than usual. I had spent the evening with an old friend, someone Lillian never liked because she couldn't control them. For the first time in years, I had laughed without filtering myself, spoken freely without weighing every word. And when I walked into our house, I realized something strange. I felt like a guest in my own home. It wasn't mine anymore. It was hers, decorated to her taste, filled with things she had chosen, arranged in a way that suited her. It wasn't a home, not really. It was just a place where I had once been allowed to exist under her conditions. And soon I wouldn't even be a part of it. Lillian was in the kitchen, sipping wine, scrolling through her phone. When she heard me, she glanced up with a carefully rehearsed smile. "You've been out late a lot lately," she said, tilting her head. "Everything okay?" Her voice was smooth, casual, but I saw it. The flicker of unease in her eyes. I shrugged. "Just busy." The answer frustrated her. I knew it did. Lillian wasn't used to me keeping things from her. For years, I had been an open book because she had made sure of it. Now, the pages were closing, and she didn't know how to handle it. She set her glass down, watching me closely. "You know, I feel like we've been a little distant lately." She reached out, placing a hand on mine. "Maybe we should go on a trip, just the two of us." I almost laughed. A trip. A month ago, I would have clung to that suggestion like a lifeline, desperate to fix things, to get back whatever illusion of happiness I thought we had. But I wasn't that man anymore. I pulled my hand away, slowly, deliberately. "I don't think that's a good idea." Her expression faltered. "Why? Why not?" I met her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw her panic. Because she knew. Maybe not everything, not yet, but she felt it. The control she had spent years perfecting was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. For the first time, she was the one chasing me, and I had never felt more free. Lillian had always been good at maintaining control, but what she failed to realize was that her power over me had never come from force. It had come from my willingness to give in. She never had to raise her voice or make ultimatums because I had been so eager to please, to keep the peace. That was the role she had assigned me, and I had played it perfectly. Until now, the cracks in her perfect world were beginning to show. The first sign was the way she watched me. At first, she tried to hide it, keeping her expression light and casual, but I could see it. The growing uncertainty, the unease. She was used to being the one who set the rules, the one who dictated how things went. But now, she didn't know what I was thinking, and that terrified her. She started testing me. One morning, she made my coffee exactly how I used to like it, something she hadn't done in years. She placed it in front of me with a small smile, as if this one act of kindness could erase everything. "I thought you might like this," she said, her voice sweet, too sweet. I stared at the cup for a moment before pushing it aside. "I don't drink it like that anymore." Her smile wavered. She tried again the next night. I had been coming home later than usual, spending time at the gym, reconnecting with old friends, reclaiming my life. She didn't like it. I could tell by the way her eyes lingered on me when I walked in, as if she was trying to figure out what had changed. "Maybe we should have a date night," she suggested over dinner, swirling her wine glass between her fingers. "It's been a while." She was trying to reel me back in. I could see it in the way she leaned forward slightly, in the way she was suddenly making an effort again. But it was too late. The damage had been done. I had seen too much, felt too much. I took a sip of my drink and set it down. "You should go without me." Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "What do you mean?" I leaned back, watching her. "You don't need me there. You never have." The silence that followed was heavy, stretching between us like a deep, unspoken truth. For the first time in our marriage, I had the power, and she hated it. I could feel it in the way she moved, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way she tried to touch me more often, as if she was trying to remind me of who I used to be. But I wasn't that man anymore. The real test came a few days later. I came home early, earlier than she expected. I was supposed to be at a late meeting, but I had wrapped things up sooner than planned. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was missing. Interesting. I stepped inside, tossing my keys onto the counter. The house was quiet, but something felt off. I walked through the rooms, noting small details I hadn't noticed before. The slight misalignment of the rug, the faint trace of perfume in the air that wasn't hers. I knew where she was. I knew who she was with, and I no longer cared. Instead of calling her, instead of demanding answers, I grabbed a drink, sat down on the couch, and turned on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder when she'd be back. I simply didn't care. Hours later, when she finally came home, her expression was carefully composed, her movements controlled. But I saw it. The slight hesitation as she put down her purse, the way her eyes flicked toward me, searching for any sign of suspicion. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" I glanced up at her and shrugged. Same as always. She waited for more, but I gave her nothing. She didn't know what to do with that. For the first time, she was the one off balance. The house of cards she had built so carefully was beginning to crumble. And soon, she would realize that she was standing in the ruins of a marriage she had destroyed with her own hands. Lillian was unraveling, and she didn't even realize it yet. She thought she was playing a game of control, of subtle manipulations and well-placed distractions. But what she didn't understand was that I was no longer a piece on her board. I wasn't reacting the way she expected, and that terrified her more than anything. She tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the panic growing behind her carefully composed smile. She watched me more than she used to, analyzing my every move. If I stayed quiet, she would press, trying to draw me into an argument because anger she could handle. Silence, that was something she couldn't control. She started making an effort in ways she hadn't for years. One night, she cooked my favorite dinner, lighting candles as if we were on a romantic date. She wore a dress she hadn't worn in ages, one that used to make my heart race. And years ago, I would have fallen for it. I would have seen this as a sign of change, of effort. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I sat across from her at the table, watching as she tried to act as if everything was fine. She smiled, reached across to touch my hand, but there was a slight tremor in her fingers. "You've been different lately," she said, keeping her voice soft, careful. "Is everything okay?" I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved so deeply, and for the first time I didn't feel anything at all. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet, detached clarity. "I've just been thinking," I said simply, taking a slow sip of my drink. Her smile didn't waver, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around her fork. "Thinking about what?" she pressed, tilting her head slightly. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to start doubting herself before finally answering. "About us." That was all I gave her. The old me would have rushed to explain, would have reassured her, would have tried to fix whatever imaginary problem she thought we had. But not this time. Lillian was used to control. She was used to dictating the pace of every conversation, steering things to her advantage. But now she was drowning in uncertainty, and I could see the frustration flicker in her eyes. "Do you think we should take a vacation?" she asked suddenly, a little too quickly, as if she had been rehearsing the question. "Get away for a bit, reconnect?" It was almost amusing, watching her scramble to patch the cracks she had spent years pretending didn't exist. I set my glass down and met her gaze, holding it just long enough to make her shift uncomfortably. "I don't think that would change anything." There, I saw it, the first real crack in her composure. For a second, her mask slipped, just barely, but I caught it. A flicker of panic, of realization. She knew. She might not have known exactly how much I had figured out, but she knew she was losing me. And Lillian had never lost control over anything in her life. She forced a laugh, but it was thin, fragile. "Come on. We're just going through a rough patch. Every couple does. We've been together for years, Ezra. We can get through this." Years ago, I would have believed her. But now I knew better. I stood up, taking my plate to the sink, rinsing it with the kind of casualness that must have driven her insane. I could feel her staring at me, waiting for me to say something, to offer her an opening. I gave her nothing. That night, I slept like a man who had already left. She just didn't know it yet. The morning after that dinner, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a sudden realization. It had been building for weeks, maybe even years. But now it was undeniable. I was done. Done playing the role of the obedient husband. Done making myself smaller to keep Lillian comfortable. Done pretending that what we had was worth saving. Because the truth was, it wasn't. Lillian had spent years molding me into something she could control, but in doing so, she had overlooked the most important thing. You can't truly own someone who wakes up. And I was awake now. I didn't pack in a hurry. I didn't storm out in anger. I took my time. The bank account I had set up was secure. The lease for my new apartment was signed, and every step had been carefully planned. There would be no messy confrontation, no dramatic farewell. Just a quiet, clean break. That morning, as I sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee made the way I liked it, not how she insisted I should, Lillian walked in, her hair still messy from sleep. She blinked at me, her face tightening slightly when she saw the duffel bag by the door. "Where are you going?" I looked up at her, taking a slow sip of my coffee before answering. "I'm leaving." Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of disbelief flashing across her face. "What do you mean, you're leaving?" "I mean exactly that," I said evenly, standing up. "I found a new place. I'm moving out." She let out a short, nervous laugh, shaking her head as if I had just told her something ridiculous. "Ezra, come on. You're not serious." But she knew I was. For years, I had been predictable. The man who always stayed, who always gave in, who always forgave. But that man was gone. "You don't have to do this," she said quickly, stepping toward me. "We can fix things. I know I've been distant. I know things haven't been perfect, but we can work on it." She was scrambling now, grasping at straws, but it was too late. I shook my head. "No, Lillian, we can't." For a moment, she just stood there, stunned. She had always been in control, always been the one to call the shots. She had spent years believing I would never leave, and now she was watching the man she thought she had shaped walk away on his own terms. I grabbed my bag, heading for the door. I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I was doing something for me. The first few weeks on my own were strange. Not in a bad way, just different. I had spent so long living in a house that never truly felt like mine, in a marriage where I was always second-guessing myself, that the silence of my new apartment felt almost surreal. But with every passing day, that silence became peace. I started to rediscover the things I had lost. I went on long drives with the windows down, music blasting, the kind of music Lillian always dismissed as immature. I reconnected with friends, people I had lost touch with because it was just easier than dealing with her disapproval. And most importantly, I started living for myself. One evening, I found myself sitting at a coffee shop, flipping through a book I had been meaning to read for years but never got around to. The sun was setting outside, casting a warm glow over the city, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide my worth. I was free, and I had never been happier.